Hi, I'm Ashley Osborne, PropTech pioneer and CEO of Davao PropTech, the digital platform that levels the playing field for smart property investors. And today I'm doing the first in our series of videos where we demystify the buying off plan process for smart investors to make the process much more straightforward for everybody. Now, buying off plan can be a really daunting process. There's lots of things you need to think about, and it's really, really difficult to get good quality information. So today I'm going to talk about the 5 mistakes that we've seen in our experience that most first-time investors make. The first mistake that we see investors make is that they simply pay too much money for the property that they're buying. And it's not just first-time buyers that make these mistakes, it's seasoned investors. People get carried away with the market, they get carried away reading the press headlines about what's happening with property growth or whatever, and they simply pay too much money. Just remember, you don't want to pay for future growth. You're buying the property today. So you need to think about what's going to happen in the market and realistically what's going on. You need to do your homework. Remember, this is not a property you're going to live in. This is an investment. So if the numbers don't stack up, simply walk away from the deal. It's not worth it. I promise you, they won't run out of properties for sale. The second thing that we see happen all the time is people overestimate rents. It's really easy to get carried away with what you think the rents might be. You're buying a new property, you're thinking that there's going to be a huge demand for that property and people are going to fall over themselves to rent that property. Guess what? There's a lot of properties all being delivered at the same time, particularly if you're buying in a new building, or in a large building. And also, you've got to remember the tenants are really, really price sensitive. So small changes in rents are going to make a huge difference to whether or not a tenant will be willing to rent a property. So you need to think about that. Think about how much growth you're factoring in. Remember, rents don't grow in the same way that capital values do. So you need to think about those things. Do your homework and look at what's being rented in the local market. What properties are available, what do the properties look like, how much rents are being achieved, and it's probably going to be a range. And then we suggest you do is look at the lower end of the range when you're doing your calculations. Don't look at the top end. That's what the people selling you are going to give you. You need to look at the bottom end. If it works at the bottom end of the figures, it's a good investment. If it doesn't work at the top end, if something goes wrong, you're the one left holding the property. The third mistake that we see people make a lot is that they underestimate the costs associated with their investment. It's really, really easy to do. And it's actually a great way to justify the price you're paying by thinking, well, it's going to cost a lot less to run the property, so it's actually a good deal. But guess what? That only works on paper. The issue is that people routinely forget some of the different costs that are involved and what that might mean to their investment completely. Things like service charge, cost to acquire, stamp duty, etc. They all have a significant impact on how much you're going to receive in your net return for your property. The only numbers that really make a great deal of sense to you as an investor are: 1, how much am I going to get after I pay all of my costs? So you don't want to look at the gross rent. That's not an important number. You need to look at the net rent. And the other thing you're really, really interested in is how much income tax are you going to pay on what you're receiving. Those are the only 2 things you need to think about from an ongoing income perspective. Don't worry about anything else, because if those 2 numbers don't stack up, the investment probably doesn't. If you're buying off plan, the chances are it's probably 12, 18, even 24 months until you actually physically take possession of the property that you're buying. And that can create a number of issues for people, because firstly, you probably don't know what you're doing in 2 years' time, let alone 5, 10, 15 years' time. And the problem is with property, it's a long-term investment. You need to hold it for a long time to make the investment actually worthwhile. And the problem is if your circumstances change significantly, i.e. you invested with a partner that you no longer want to invest with, you should have invested in a company but you decided to invest personally, those things are really, really difficult to unwind, and they can be very costly because you're probably going to have to pay stamp duty again, which you've already paid once, potentially capital gains tax, and all sorts of costs just to sell the property essentially to yourself, and it makes no sense. So what you really need to think about is what you're intending to do before you buy the property over the long term. The final thing that we see people do all the time is pay far too much money for market access. Now, you might think that if you're running a big international sales business, it's really, really easy to meet new people every week to sell them property. Well, it's actually not. And if you're running a big international sales business, like I used to, the most difficult thing you're going to find is actually finding those new people every week, because you can't keep telling the same database of people that this is the best property you can ever buy and this is the one, because they get tired of you very, very quickly. So a lot of people that are running big businesses that sell property therefore need to resort to lots of other means to try and meet new people to sell them property. And that could be things like paying for exhibitions or very, very expensive advertising, or potentially even meeting a whole bunch of introducers who will charge you a fee as the agent or the developer just to introduce you to new people. And those fees could be really, really high. In some circumstances, introductory fees for referrers might be 8, 10, 12%. And that's going to have you as the investor will be paying those costs one way or another. So you really need to think about it. You need to think about, when you're buying these property, who else is in the deal with you and what are they getting out of that deal? And if you don't know, ask the question. And if you're unsure, ask whoever you're buying the property for to write specifically in the agreement that you're buying who's getting what and who's involved. Do not pay too much money just to buy a property. It's going to kill your return. You make your return when you buy a property, not when you sell it. That's the end of our first video. We're here to help smart investors better understand the buying off plan process and give them enough information to make better, more informed investment decisions. I hope you liked our video. If you did, subscribe, follow us, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Ashley Osborne, PropTech Pioneer.